Hyundai has some truly aggressive plans. They say that by 2025, they're going to have 23 fully electric models on sale in the United States. We first got the Ioniq 5, now we have the Ioniq 6. But even though this shares some design elements with the Ioniq 5, this is certainly a different member of the family. This is an awful lot sleeker, and as you can see, this is in fact a four-door sedan, not a hatchback, not a crossover, not an SUV, not a pickup truck like we find out of some EV manufacturers. The benefit for this is extreme efficiency, and that's why they're calling this some sort of Streamliner thing rather than a sedan. It's still a sedan, but it is incredibly efficient with a 0.22 coefficient of drag. This is among the most aerodynamic vehicles you can buy in North America today, and it really looks it with this extremely rounded front end. Very clean lines going on. You can see these full LED headlights here with all these little pixels going on inside. There are hundreds and hundreds of pixels all around the vehicle, and some really interesting design touches that I think are pretty tricky to manufacture, like the fact that this hood line actually kind of comes over the front fender. That's a really difficult touch to get right as far as body panel alignment. Lots of aerodynamic tweaks going on up front, functional air ducts on each side of the front end, those direct air around the vehicle, around the front tire in order to help improve efficiency. Speaking of the tires, we do have slightly smaller tires than we find in the Ioniq 5. These are 245 width tires maximum. That's likely due to the efficiency mission. If you get the rear-wheel drive version of the Ioniq 6, this will go 340 miles on a single charge. If you get the all-wheel drive version, you get 320 horsepower, 310 miles of range. That is significantly higher than the boxy Ioniq 5. The sleek design continues as we move around to the rear, where I'm also getting a lot of Porsche vibes with the whale tail spoiler right here on the trunk lid. Not a bad thing to be reminded of when we're talking about a Hyundai that is likely going to start around $45,000 for the least expensive model. Again, lots of intricate details going on in the back here, like all of these little pixel elements back here in the rear taillight module. This entire bar down here at the bottom lights up when the brakes are applied, and then we also get the center-mounted stoplight right there on top of that big wing. The backup lights, those are located right down here on the bumper, also with some reflectors down there, which is kind of an interesting touch. Now, rather sadly, in Europe, you get amber turn signals. Here in America, we get the silly red ones. Who knows why? But this is a sedan, so there is actually a cargo hatchlet, I guess you could say, back here with 60/40 folding rear seats. If you want extra cargo practicality, you'll have to get the Ioniq 5, but if you want sedan-like driving dynamics, sedan-like style, and then, of course, the additional range that affords, then you're going to want the Ioniq 6. With EVs flooding the market every day, it seems, the Ioniq 6 is differentiating itself by extreme efficiency. You'll be able to go 340 miles with a 77.4 kilowatt-hour lithium-ion battery pack. That's the same pack that we find in the Ioniq 5. And the design philosophy of the Ioniq 6 is somewhat similar in the respect that they've chosen not to give us a front trunk up here, just a small storage area right there under the hood that really tightens up the dimensions and gives us a lot more room on the inside for passengers. You can see that the hood, even though this is a sleek sedan, is actually not that long. In terms of overall length, this is around 191 inches, so closer to the Sonata in terms of exterior dimensions than the Model 3. This is about 6 inches longer than that Model 3. But you should be getting about 4.4 miles per kilowatt hour in the rear-wheel drive version. Why does that matter? Well, it means that if you plug this in at home and you have a 10.9 kilowatt capable EVSE, you'll be gaining range at nearly 48 miles an hour. That is significantly faster than pretty much everything else out on the market except for that most efficient Model 3. It also means that if you're worried about road tripping, you'll be able to DC fast charge this battery, 70% of it, from 10% to 80% in just 18 minutes, and you'll be able to go from 0 to completely full in 40 minutes and get another 340 miles of range out of the battery. I don't have any official EPA numbers just yet, but I suspect this is also going to be one of the few EVs out there that get slightly better highway numbers than city numbers. That is significantly faster than the average new EV that's been released over the last 12 months or so, not to mention really inefficient EVs like the pickup trucks that are out there now. Charging happens behind this power charge door on the rear fender. It, of course, uses the CCS charging standard right there. And if you connect this to the appropriate DC fast charge station, you can get 10% to 80% in just 18 minutes in the Ioniq 6. Perhaps more impressive than that, though, is the 0% to 100% charge time. And that's something that we've noticed in the Ioniq 5, the EV6, and likely the rest of the EGMP family. This will go 0% to 100% in 43 minutes. So you can drive all 340 miles, charge it back up in 40 minutes, drive another 340 miles if you wanted. Now it's time to hop in. Of course, no EV would be complete without some powered aerodynamic door handles, so we find those on the EV6. Jumping inside, we find a seating position that is surprisingly upright for a sedan. The seats are very similar to the ones in the Ioniq 5 as far as the controls go, and in this trim, which is likely the top-end trim, I have identical power controls on the driver and front passenger seat. Obviously, there's a tilt telescopic steering column. It looks very, very similar to the Ioniq 5, with one important exception that we're going to talk about in a bit. Lots of storage is going on in here. You can see this large center console, but it does not move, and it is actually a little bit different than we find in the Ioniq 5. Large storage area right there underneath. You can see all that room there, big cup holders here. And in the center, we find the window switches because they wanted to make the door panels really light, really airy, and give you a lot of room for storage there. Now let's go for a quick spin around the interior. Let's start out on the driver's side where we find a slightly different steering wheel design than the Ioniq 5. The big difference is right here in the middle where we actually have a series of LEDs that make up that little Ioniq sub-brand logo, and they change colors. So if I hit that button, you can see that they're starting to change colors for the voice command. They also do a startup dance with the vehicle. It's really kind of a cool touch. Apparently the chairman of Hyundai wanted the steering wheel to do something different rather than just have a logo on it, and that's exactly what they got. Front and center, we of course have the large twin LCD screen setup that Hyundai has become known for. Instrument cluster over there, big touch screen over here. These are both about 12 inches. And on this side, we have things like Apple CarPlay, Android Auto, etc. Obviously, the controls for the seat heating and ventilation, steering wheel heating, things like that. All the EV setup screens, including the vehicle to load functionality. And a big change for this vehicle is something that a lot of folks are going to be happy with, especially if you've had a Tesla before. This is now going to be doing destination conditioning for the battery. If you have the destination set as a DC charge station in the navigation system, the system is going to precondition the battery in advance. Of course, there's also winter mode, and I have to say that with my experience in the Ioniq 5, preconditioning wasn't really necessary to get insane DC fast charge speeds out of this vehicle. The rest of the dashboard is a really clean design with lots of translucent and semi-translucent components, especially this big bar that runs right across the dashboard. We have color changing ambient lighting in two zones, upper and lower, like we find in a lot of luxury vehicles. We have a very similar dual zone climate control setup down here that features a combination of touch buttons and then physical buttons just above. Back to the steering wheel itself, we have a drive mode button right there. You can see those LEDs on that side. And then we still have the stock style shifter that we find in the Ioniq 5. Park is a button right there at the end. Going back to the center console and then going down it for a bit, we have the Qi wireless charging mat right there, USB interface port, two large cup holders, and this is where we find the window switches. I am a little bit concerned about these window switch locations, however, because if you have big gulp drinks in here, they could end up splashing on those window switches. That would be a bit of a bummer. On the passenger side, we have a large bin-style glove compartment with a large slot component there as well, so you could easily put large items inside that storage area. The big interior difference between the US spec Ioniq 6 and the one that we saw in Korea is this big wing right here. There's no LCD because we have a real side view mirror that's due to legislation in the United States. This has kind of a translucent theme to it that's really, really cool, as I said before. And then we have individual little pixels going on here in this section that connects one air vent to the other, of course, with all of that ambient lighting running around. Now it's time to check out the back seat. Keep in mind this is a Sonata-sized sedan, not a Tesla Model 3-sized sedan. So we find absolutely gobs and gobs of room in here. The front seat's comfortably adjusted for me at 6 feet tall. You can see I have nearly a foot of legroom left. This is incredibly spacious, and we have a completely flat floor back here. USB-C charge ports, air vents right there in the middle, but there's that aerodynamic reality, and that means that I don't have a great deal of headroom. In fact, I do have to kind of crane my head to one side in order to actually stuff my head back there to that headrest. If you're trying to sit in a more upright position, my head's still touching the ceiling. If you're shorter than I am, this should be just fine. However, we have a 60/40 folding rear seat, rear armrest with two big cup holders, and the seats themselves are very generously sized and very comfortable. Also, nice and wide back here, which is something I hadn't expected. If you were thinking that this would be more Honda Civic sized on the inside, fear not, this is not the same size as the Elantra. On the inside, it actually is bigger in a lot of dimensions than the Sonata. Behind the trunk lid, which is manual, not powered, we find 11.2 cubic feet of cargo space. Improving cargo practicality, we again have those split 60/40 folding rear seat backs. I actually think the 11.2 cubic feet of cargo space might be wrong. I think it's actually a little bit larger than that, but we should know soon. Under the load floor here, we find a bit of additional storage space, a place for you to put your vehicle to load connector, and of course, the can of Fix-A-Flat because we don't have a spare tire. According to Hyundai, the Ioniq 6 is going to be on sale in early 2023. So if you want to get your hands on one, it's time to act. And do you want to get your hands on one? I'm really intrigued to hear from all of you down there in the comment section. This is a very high style, very efficient sedan, but it's not a crossover, which is what a lot of folks seem to want out of their next electric vehicle. As far as comparisons go, the Model 3 is the closest to the Ioniq 6, and outside of that, we have a lot of luxury options. And I think this really competes quite well with those luxury options in terms of style, especially what's going on back here with a lot of the design cues, these 700 pixels, this enormous spoiler on the back, things like the translucent shark's fin antenna on the roof there. That's a really cool touch. And all of the lines and surfacing is done really, really well on the Ioniq 6. I hadn't expected this level of attention to detail for something that's probably going to be around $45,000 starting. Now, outside of this, in the electric sedan market, we have something like the BMW i4. That could be considered a competitor, but that is essentially a converted BMW 4 Series sedan. We also have something like the Tesla Model 3, Model S. Model S is going to be a lot more expensive. The Mercedes-Benz EQE and EQS, the Genesis G80. Not a lot of electric sedans that are in the affordable category. So if you're shopping for something like a Hyundai Sonata and you'd rather go electric, you might want to take a look at the Ioniq 6. Now I have to admit, if I were shopping for an electric vehicle, I probably would get the Ioniq 5 and give up a little bit of efficiency. But that is sort of the mission of the Ioniq 6, is that efficiency mission. With just a 77.4 kilowatt hour battery pack, you can go up to 340 miles. There really are no other EVs available in America that give you that kind of range with a battery pack this small, because efficiency, efficiency, efficiency is the mission of this vehicle. And if you really care about the environment and you really care about efficiency, this is the direction you should go in, and you should probably give up on some of those big battery EVs out there and focus on something a bit more efficient like this. Let me know what you think about that in the comments section. Find me over at Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, all those other social places. I'll see all of you next week.